Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and journalist Glenn Greenwald went head-to-head on Greenwald's show over RFK's now-deleted tweet praising Roger Waters. Here's a snippet of that exchange.
You live in any of these other countries, and you're gay, for example, you can be killed for that. Israel is the only place where you have freedom. If you're a transvestite, if you have other kind of dissident views, you'd much rather be in Israel than any other place.
I get that argument, but go ahead. You can finish. All right, well, I just wanted to ask you quickly.
Israel, and we need to have the same standard for judging Israel as we judge other Arab countries. We should, and Israel is going into the West Bank and killing children. It's never doing that deliberately. Never. And nobody has ever said it is.
Well, a lot of people have said it is.
If you recall, RFK Jr. found himself in hot water after he first applauded the former Pink Floyd bassist for his stance on the coronavirus and his criticism of the war in Ukraine. But Rogers' pro-Palestinian position has not sat well with supporters of Israel, leading the candidate to walk back his praise. And of course, he didn't just walk back his praise. He described Roger Waters' performances, his statement, as anti-Semitic. He said that he applied a different standard to Israel as opposed to other countries in the Middle East. And this back and forth, which I strongly recommend people watch in full. It was a really great interview. Glenn asked some really excellent, fair, but tough questions. He really doubled down on that position, saying, as you heard in the clip, that that other Arab countries intentionally kill Israeli children, whereas Israel never does the same. We heard Glenn push back, saying many people say that that is not, in fact, the case. Mm-hmm. I think something like 50 Palestinian children have been killed in the course of this past year, including one just last week who was shot while in a car on a way to, I believe, a family event, shot next to his mother. These are really disputed questions, and of course, the way that Roger Waters keeps framing these rankles people precisely because it is an echo of the kinds of talking points one frequently sees from an Israel lobby, whose interest, of course, is in maintaining the enormous amount, billions of dollars in funding that America sends to that country, while many people in Israel have a better standard of living in the United States. So Glenn went on to ask RFK Jr. to distinguish his attitude toward Israel and the funding issues there from his attitude in Ukraine, saying if you were to go around the United States and ask, the question isn't who is better, the Israelis or the Palestinians. The question is, why are we in the United States transferring billions of dollars of aid each year to a country, Israel, whose citizens in many ways enjoy a higher standard of living than a lot of the ways American citizens live? What is your argument for why we should be sending so much money to Israel but not to Ukraine? And I think the controversy is that many viewers of this episode did not feel like RFK Jr.'s response really reckoned with the inconsistency between how he's treating those two countries. Did he really
continue to endorse aid to Israel?
Yeah. Yes. He says we have the kind of narrative about how we have a special relationship. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the only place that you can live and not get killed if you're gay. Those kind of pat arguments, kind of ignoring
I don't support foreign aid at all, and there are actually a lot of Republicans who don't either, who have spoken out, who are not certainly not coming at this from like a leftist perspective, but think it's perfectly conservative to advocate closing off aid to foreign countries, including Israel. Yeah, I think you were just about to get to this. It was interesting to hear RFK Jr. Make a defense of Israel that sounds to me like the same kind of defense that liberals generally make of the need to protect Ukraine. They do lead, especially when they're talking to their own tribe. They start with Russia has a terrible record on LGBT rights. Yep. That's the main. I mean, this is something that gets brought up a lot by there's a kind of liberal neocon axis that wants to delegitimize criticisms of continued war kind of aid in general on a lot of issues in the Middle East. So that we have to, they didn't recognize same-sex marriage there, so that necessitates.
We can drop all these bombs and take their oil.
It's a very similar argument. So
and Glenn said exactly that, by the way. I mean, it's really worth watching in full. Glenn said many defenders of our aid to Ukraine and our military support of Ukraine say that it is a democracy and Russia is an autocracy. How do you distinguish those arguments from the arguments you're making there? And, RFK Jr., in all fairness, he did say repeatedly, I don't think any criticism of Israeli policy should be characterized as anti-Semitic. The problem is he then turned around and did seem to characterize very substantive criticism of Israeli policy. Glenn Greenwald pointed to the fact that Israel has become a very conservative right-wing country of late in terms of its leadership. It's criticized the settlements, the lack of plausibility behind a two-state solution at this point because of these illegal settlements.
He supports a two-state solution, I believe.
Right, but the left at this point does not. The issue is, and what Glenn was bringing up, is that it's become implausible because of all of these illegal Israeli settlements. There's the landmass is too settled, non-contiguous, and at this point, people want there to be a one-state solution where Palestinians are treated equally under the law, which is in direct tension with the idea of there being an explicitly Israeli state.
Is that what the Palestinians want?
There's self-determination, and it's a mixed bag, but that is increasingly the move that people are going to as the two-state solution becomes untenable. And
you say on
the
status left specifically.
Yeah, among many of RFK Jr. supporters, which is why this is such a contentious issue right now on the internet. And the line that RFK Jr. specifically kept coming back to is we cannot have a different standard for criticism of Israel versus criticism of some of these Arab nations. And while I would agree with that, I think it's a claim that does not bear out. What is the evidence that Roger Waters or anybody else is not happy to criticize a given Arab nation for its standards on human rights or women's rights or any of the like? But moreover, isn't there a question specifically about Israel because of the volume of U.S. aid to that particular country? And isn't what we're talking about with Ukraine and Israel and all of these countries is how much money America should be giving to support whatever is going on in those nations? Our ability or need to speak on what happens in some random part of the world is really there's nothing there unless it is the case that we are supporting what's going on there through our tax dollars, especially when there's so many people, as he's made the case for Ukraine funding, so many people domestically that could really use that money. And so it's something that he's going to have to continue to wrestle with. Eventually, I think he summed it up by saying, you're raising some good questions, Glenn, and we can move on. But I think it really does undermine a lot of people's confidence, not just in his attitude to Israel-Palestine, but his understanding of what's going on in Ukraine. How consistent is he going to be when these issues continue to come up globally if he's not able to analogize the reasons why he objects to the funding in Ukraine to why he should potentially object to funding in other parts of the world? Yeah,
for sure. It seems like a misread of the both from the left perspective and the kind of America First perspective that he, to the extent he's trying to be a hybrid candidate that speaks to both disaffected populists on both sides. It's a populism on both sides that wants more more attention being paid to the problems at home, not because the problems in the rest of the world aren't serious, but because we have to be honest about our ability to fix them in the way that we have, and have to reckon with all the ways, some well-intentioned, some not well-intentioned, efforts by the American government have made things worse, have led to really unsavory consequences. That's putting it delicately. So maybe he'll reflect on that more after talking it out with Glenn.
Yeah.
And we're actually going to have an interview with RFK Jr. later this week. So you won't want to miss that. Have more details on it very soon. But it is on the books. More Rising right after this.